Curvature introduces declination, visible declination of mountain 3, and it's going to drop down. Particularly if this distance right here between mountain number 2 and mountain number 3 is vast, 30, 40, 50 miles, then you're looking at many hundreds and even thousands of feet of declination, which is visible sinkage of the mountain. So it's literally sinking out of view from your horizontal line of sight over the top of the two mountains. Okay, that makes sense. So we're going to get rid of the line of sight and the mountains, and we're going to zoom out again and get rid of the globe, and let's go back to our flat Earth and our 3 mountains on the flat Earth. So if we call this mountain number 1, and this is mountain number 2, and this is mountain number 3. If you're standing on mountain number 1 and looking across to mountain number 2, then mountain number 3 should be either just barely visible or just barely obscured behind mountain number 2. And if you're somehow able to move perpendicular to the line created by the alignment of the 3 mountains, say 100 or 200 feet, and then look across to mountain number 2, and these peaks are all prominent, in other words, they're standing individually with nothing obscuring the side of them, then if you can move 100 or 200 feet off to one side, when you look across past mountain number 2, you would see mountain number 3. And of course that's on a flat Earth. So your line of sight would be right at mountain number 3. So that's the basic premise of the test. Find 3 mountains in a row, 2 of them of similar or identical height. One of them can be slightly higher, but put myself at the same exact elevation of the other 2 and look across and record the observation and see, is mountain number 3 visible, or is mountain number 3 not visible because the Earth is curved and it has visually declined by a significant distance. That's the test. Part of my quest in trying to put this test together was not only to find 3 mountains that were the same elevation in a row, but also 3 mountains that were well known and well photographed, so that anyone watching this video could validate for themselves that indeed I was actually recording the mountains that I claimed I was recording. So one of the mountains is Tennant Mountain, which isn't actually in the video, but is where the camera was placed to capture the shot. And actually I was on a ridge down in front of Tennant Mountain. And the foreground mountains, and in particular Frying Pan Mountain, is a really recognizable mountain. It's got a Forest Service tower on top of it and 2 communications antennas. Also included in the shot, but not really part of the test, is number 4 here, as you can see, Mount Pisgah. And Mount Pisgah also has a tower on the top of it, and it's a really popular spot for hikers, just like Frying Pan Mountain is. Both of the mountains are very well photographed and well known, so it's going to be real easy for anyone to validate that the mountains I claim are in the video are the actual mountains in the video. As for the mountain in the background of the shot, Graybeard Mountain, there aren't quite as many pictures of it on the internet, but they can be found. And Graybeard Mountain is part of the Black Mountain Range, which rises up out of Black Mountain, North Carolina. There's really only maybe 9 or 10 prominent peaks on the entire Black Mountain Range. So with a little bit of work, it's fairly easy to confirm that the mountain I'm claiming is Graybeard Mountain is indeed Graybeard Mountain. Okay, and to do a little more validation here of my data, I have Google Maps. As you can see, there's Tennant Mountain listed. I was actually a little less than half a mile in front of Tennant Mountain. Not really at the peak, but down in front of it. And you can see that the distance from Tennant Mountain to Graybeard Mountain, not the trailhead, this is the only thing they list, is the trailhead. The mountain is actually right there, so it's a little bit further. They don't list the mountain for some reason, but you can see the distance is 40.43 miles, and I was about 0.43 miles in front of Tennant Mountain. So it's roughly 40 miles from my location with the camera to the peak of Graybeard Mountain. And then, of course, I'm looking past Frying Pan Mountain, which is somewhere in here, and I have a map for that as well. This is Frying Pan Mountain. See up here, Frying Pan Mountain to Graybeard Trail. Again, it's to the mountain. So this is Frying Pan Mountain. So Tennant Mountain was back here where the camera is, and from Tennant Mountain to Frying Pan Mountain is about 6 miles. Then you can see the distance from Frying Pan Mountain to Graybeard Mountain is 33.79 miles. And I just went with 34 miles. Okay, and with regard to locating images of the mountains that I used, you can see here, here's a search for Frying Pan Mountain. There are lots of images of the tower and from the tower. So there's not a ton of long-range shots of the tower like the one in my video, but they're out there. Here's one here. Mount Pisgah, on the other hand, there are tons of images of Mount Pisgah from a distance, where you can see the antenna and the whole mountain. That's easy to validate. There's another one. And Graybeard Mountain, it's kind of similar to Frying Pan Mountain in that people like to hike up to Graybeard and take photographs from it. So you don't see a lot of photographs of it so much. It's kind of like a bald, or mostly a bald. It used to be completely bald. It's got maybe waist-high shrubs on the summit now. And some of the images of Graybeard are from the wrong angle, so they don't look the same as the angle that I recorded. But I do have one really good source here. There's a website called masterviews.net, and a guy named Ken Gager who took a bunch of photographs of mountains from the overlooks all the way along the Blue Ridge Parkway. And he identified hundreds of mountain peaks in the distance. So this is a really good source. Actually, this image is very similar to the image that I collected. If we zoom in here, he actually shot this from Graveyard Fields, which is about a mile from where I was, maybe 3/4 of a mile. And you can see that the image, when you see what I'll show you a little bit later on, you'll see that it's very similar actually. He identifies Graybeard Mountain right here at 40 miles distance, which is the same distance I claim that it is from where I am. Of course, it's 3/4 of a mile from me, but I'm kind of lateral to his position, so I'm not closer to Graybeard, I'm just off to the side. And then there's Pinnacle, which is 42 miles away, and then these are most of the prominent peaks of the Black Mountain Range. So he's a good neutral source for photography of these mountains, because he has nothing to do with any sort of research of the shape of the Earth. And you can see here's Frying Pan Mountain. That means I'm off down behind this ridge here, which is Graveyard Ridge, off to the side. I'm looking past Frying Pan Mountain at Graybeard Mountain. You'll see that this looks very similar to the video I recorded, the evidence that I'll be sharing with you shortly. So that's some evidence for Graybeard Mountain. If you need to validate that what I'm showing you is Graybeard Mountain, then it definitely can be done. The Black Mountain Range is very identifiable. Like I said, there's probably only about 10 prominent peaks. And that would include all of the ones he lists here. So there's Graybeard, Pinnacle, Potato Knob, Clingman's Peak, Mount Gibbs, Mount Mitchell, which is a great place to hike, Mount Craig, which is another great place to hike. All of these are the most prominent peaks, I would say, of the Black Mountain Range, which rises up out of Black Mountain, North Carolina. Okay, so here's another graphic that I did, which is, it's actually 44 inches long. Every inch equals a mile, and I have all 3 of the mountains included in this image. So I have Tennant Mountain, where I was located out in front of, and then Frying Pan Mountain and Graybeard Mountain. So you can see that there's a large distance between Graybeard Mountain and Frying Pan, and then a much shorter distance between Tennant and Frying Pan. The green band along the bottom of the image is actually the surface of the Earth, and the curvature that I put in there, it's not really noticeable too much if you look at it, but it is actually accurate according to the mainstream curvature formula. So it's 44 miles, and there's 1,290 feet of declination from the left side of the image to the right side of the image. It curves down ever so slightly. It's not very noticeable, but it does. Now what we're going to do is zoom in on a section of this. Here's Tennant Mountain. The camera was located out in front of it and down below the peak, as it is taller than Graybeard Frying Pan. And I put myself at 5,400 feet with the camera. Actually, the altimeter, which I verified continually along the hike with topographic maps, was giving me a reading of 5,380 feet, which is really more my target height. I wanted to err on the low side. As you can see here, Frying Pan Mountain is 5,360 feet. It actually varies depending on where you go, from 5,340 to 5,360, maybe even 5,370. But it does have 40 to 50 foot trees on the summit, and I had to take those into account because it's visual observation. So the mountain looks to be, let's say it's 5,350, and it has 40 foot tall trees, so it's 5,390 with the trees on the top. And I'll show you some images of those. So it was roughly the same as where I was. Like I said, I was at 5,380, and Frying Pan is maybe 5,390, 5,380. So close to being accurate that I just went ahead and went with it. And as you can see here, there's 6 miles of distance between Tennant Mountain and Frying Pan Mountain. Here's the curved surface of the Earth, which does curve downward throughout the entire image, whereas the horizontal plane line of sight is flat. You can see there's 6 miles between Tennant Mountain and Frying Pan Mountain, and then as we move along, the red horizontal plane stays level, and the surface of the Earth is curving down. It's declining. And the distance is 34 miles between Frying Pan Mountain and Graybeard Mountain. So in Graybeard Mountain, again, you get different elevation readings, anywhere from 5,370 to 5,410. I assumed it's about 5,390 roughly. And it has maybe 5 foot tall little shrubs on it. So it's going to appear to be 5,390, 5,395. It's going to be visually appear very, very close to the same elevation as Frying Pan Mountain. And then I've got a little bit of graphic in here that just shows the declination we should have. You can see that, well, I'll just read this. The standard Earth curvature formula stipulates 770 feet of declination over 34 miles, and I will verify this shortly. This means Graybeard Mountain should visually sink to 4,630 feet. That would be 5,400 minus 770. It should not be visible from the camera position. Also notice that the scale is very accurate, as 7 times 770 equals 5,390, which is very close to the actual height of Graybeard Mountain. So in other words, the horizontal line of sight established from the camera position over the top of Frying Pan Mountain would be right here, and the 770 foot of decline is how far Graybeard Mountain should sink down out of view. So you shouldn't be able to see it looking across on a straight line. It should be down out of view by 770 feet, which is a substantial distance. And here are some of the elevation numbers for the mountains in the test. So I'm going to use summitpost.org, which shows Graybeard Mountain at 5,408. I've seen it at 5,375, 5,385. I kind of figure it's right around 5,400 feet, maybe 5,395. And visually, it's not going to appear much taller than that, because here's what the top looks like. So these are very low shrubs, maybe 3-4 feet tall. So you can walk around up on the top of Graybeard Mountain and you're just going to have a clear view, 360 degrees. So they add maybe 5 feet onto the top, visually speaking. So Frying Pan Mountain here on summitpost.org is 5,340, and again I've seen it from 5,320, maybe 5,330, all the way up to